My wife and daughter left me after my wife found a job that paid her double my salary. She said, "You are just a dead weight. You don't deserve any love." I was sad and heartbroken because I sacrificed everything to make them happy. 2 weeks after our divorce, I met my ex-wife again. What happened was rather unbelievable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Jonas Campbell from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I used to think love was about showing up. About the late nights and early mornings, the extra shifts and missed holidays. About picking up the pieces before anyone noticed they were falling. For 12 years, I carried the weight of our lives on my back, quietly, without complaint, like it was my duty. I worked long hours at a mid-level management job that barely covered the bills, but I always made sure the lights stayed on, food was on the table, and my wife, Michelle, and our daughter, Ava, had everything they needed. Michelle didn't have to work for the first 10 years of our marriage. She said she wanted to be home for Ava, and I agreed. I took pride in giving her that. I remember walking in some nights, shoulders aching, eyes burning from exhaustion, and seeing her curled up on the couch watching TV like the world was weightless. I didn't mind, not then. I convinced myself that love meant sacrifice. I told myself I was lucky just to come home to them. But something shifted the year Michelle went back to work. She got hired by a tech firm downtown, something with better pay, benefits, even a fancy title. I was proud of her at first. Genuinely. I thought, finally, she's getting out there. This will be good for all of us. But her energy changed almost overnight. She started coming home later than me. Started dressing differently, sharper, more confident. She'd always been beautiful, but now she carried herself like someone who knew it. Dinners got quieter. Our conversations more clipped. I'd ask about her day, and she'd respond with a distracted, "Fine," while texting. She stopped asking about mine entirely. I chalked it up to stress, the adjustment of a new job, but deep down I felt it. The distance. The way she looked at me like I wasn't enough anymore. Like the man who used to hold everything together had become invisible. Then, one Thursday night, it all cracked. I came home to find her packing a small suitcase. Ava was sitting on the couch, looking down at her phone, refusing to meet my eyes. I asked Michelle what was going on, and she didn't even look up from the drawer she was emptying. "I'm leaving," she said. Just like that. No lead-up. No explanation. Just a decision she had already made. I found a place closer to work. "Ava's coming with me." I stood there, stunned, my work bag still in my hand. "What are you talking about?" "We haven't even," she cut me off. "You're just dead weight, Marcus. You always have been. I stayed with you out of obligation. But now I don't have to. I deserve more. I deserve love that doesn't feel like a burden." I didn't know what hurt more, the words or how calmly she said them. Like I wasn't even a person to her anymore. Like everything I'd done for our family, every sleepless night, every compromise, had been reduced to a nuisance. I looked at Ava, hoping she'd say something, anything, but she didn't. She just got up and followed her mother out the door. I stood in the hallway for what felt like hours after they left, the echo of her words clanging in my ears. Deadweight, not even worthy of love. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the impression her body had left in the sheets. The divorce papers came 3 days later, delivered by a courier. No warning, no message, just a stack of cold legal documents asking for my signature. Her lawyer had clearly been prepared. I stared at the lines for hours, reading every clause, every subtle jab buried in legalese. She wanted full custody. She wanted no alimony, no communication, no ties. It wasn't just separation, she wanted erasure. Like I had been nothing more than a temporary placeholder in her life. I signed them, not because I agreed, but because I was tired. I couldn't fight someone who had already made me the villain in their mind. But before I sealed the envelope, I wrote a note on the back page in pen. "Thank you for everything." I meant it. Not out of sarcasm, not even out of bitterness, but because despite everything, I had loved her. And if this was how it ended, I wanted my last word to carry dignity. She called me the next day, not to apologize, not to explain, but to spit venom. You think you're some kind of martyr? She snapped. That little note of yours was pathetic. You always do this. Try to look like the bigger person while being spineless. You disgust me. Her voice shook with fury, and for a moment, I didn't recognize it. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone hardened by ambition, consumed by some version of herself that no longer had room for me. I didn't respond. I let her finish. Then I ended the call without a word. I blocked her number, and for the first time in weeks, I sat still. Not calm, not at peace, but still, like the eye of a storm had finally passed, and all that was left was the wreckage. That weekend, I walked through the house slowly, taking in the quiet. It was so loud before, with Ava's laughter, Michelle's music, the sound of life. Now, it was just walls and echoes. I picked up her favorite mug from the sink, the one she used every morning for tea. I held it for a moment, then placed it gently in a box labeled Donate. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just empty. But I promised myself, in that quiet, that I would not chase someone who could walk away so easily. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't grovel. I had given everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. So maybe it was time I gave some of that energy back to myself. The silence didn't just fill the house, it filled me. In the days that followed, I moved through my routines like a ghost in my own life. I'd wake up before the sun, still rising out of habit, and sit at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee that tasted more like duty than comfort. There were no footsteps padding down the hallway, no sound of Ava groaning about school, no soft humming from Michelle while she got ready in the bathroom. Just silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I'd never realized how much I depended on those sounds to tether me to the world. Without them, everything felt suspended in slow motion. I still went to work, still answered emails, still showed up to meetings with my usual calm, collected face. But it was all surface. Inside, I was collapsing in slow increments. Every time I passed by Ava's room and saw the untouched bed, I had to swallow a grief that sat like concrete in my throat. On the third day, I opened a drawer in the living room and found one of Ava's old drawings. It was a crayon sketch of the three of us, stick figures with smiles as wide as the page, standing under a bright yellow sun. My family, it said in crooked letters at the top. I sat on the couch and stared at it for over an hour. That simple drawing broke me in a way nothing else had. Because I realized something then. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my wife. I was mourning the version of my life I thought I had built. The illusion that we were a team. That all my sacrifices meant something. That being a good man, loyal, steady, dependable, would be enough. But it wasn't. Not for her. I kept expecting Ava to call. Even just a text. I didn't want her to choose sides. I just wanted her to remember that I was still here. That I was still her father. But nothing came. No messages. No missed calls. Michelle had done more than walk away. She had erased me from both their lives like I was a smudge on a window. She finally had the clarity to clean. It hurt more than I could admit out loud. I was raised by a man who taught me to take pain like a punch, silently and with squared shoulders. So I didn't tell anyone what I was going through. Not my coworkers. Not my siblings. Not even my best friend, Darren, who had been there for every major moment in my life since college. I told myself I didn't want the pity. But truthfully, I didn't want the shame of admitting that the woman I loved didn't love me back anymore. The silence was shattered a week later when a courier came to my door with another envelope. This time, the finalized divorce decree. I didn't even have to sign anything. It was done. Neat. Clean. Efficient. Like a business transaction. Attached was a custody agreement. Michelle would retain full custody, but I'd be allowed supervised visits twice a month, pending her approval. Her approval. I laughed when I read that part. A bitter, hollow laugh that bounced off the empty walls. After everything I'd done to hold our family together, I now needed her permission to see my own daughter. I set the papers on the counter and stared out the kitchen window, hands trembling slightly. It wasn't just about losing them anymore. It was about how easily I'd been reduced to a footnote in their lives. That night, I wrote a letter to Ava. Not because I thought she'd see it, but because I needed to say things out loud. I told her I missed her, that I loved her, that none of this was her fault. I told her I was proud of her, and that even if she couldn't reach out right now, I'd always be here, waiting. I didn't send it. I folded it carefully and placed it inside a small box along with other things I didn't know what to do with: her baby bracelet, an old birthday card, a photo of the three of us at the beach. I called it my hope box, even though hope was starting to feel like a cruel joke. 2 days after that, Michelle called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. The moment I picked up, her voice pierced through like a knife. "Did you really think that note was going to make you look like a saint?" she snapped. "You think that pathetic little thank you was some kind of grand gesture?" I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because none of them felt worth saying. She was angry. At what? I didn't know. Me? Herself? The fact that I hadn't begged? That I hadn't tried to fight for her after she already walked out? "You always do this, Marcus. You play the quiet victim and hope people see you as the good guy. You're a coward." That last word hit differently. Not because I believed it, but because it told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't found peace. She hadn't found clarity. She had found bitterness. And now, she wanted to hand it to me like a gift. I ended the call without saying a word. Then I blocked her number. Not out of anger, but necessity. I'd spent years bending to accommodate her moods, her wants, her silent expectations. And I realized, in that moment, that if I didn't start protecting my own peace, I would drown in her chaos. I didn't need to win the argument. I didn't even need to be understood. I just needed to be free. That weekend, I went through the house and started taking down photos. Not out of spite, but because looking at them felt like reopening a wound that wouldn't scab over. I kept a few. Not for her. For Ava. For the memories that were still real, even if the future they pointed to was gone. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. I wrote every night, pouring out the words I couldn't say to anyone else. Sometimes they were angry. Sometimes they were grief-stricken. Sometimes they were nothing more than scribbles through tears. But they were mine, and they were honest. By the end of the second week, the silence started to feel different. Not softer, but more bearable. Like background noise instead of a scream. I still missed Ava every minute of every day. I still ached when I saw fathers walking their daughters through the park or heard a child laugh in the grocery store. But I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I had accepted that this pain wouldn't be fixed with a single conversation or gesture. It was something I would have to carry. But maybe, just maybe, it was also something I could survive. 2 weeks after I blocked Michelle's number, I got called into my manager's office at work. I thought maybe I had made a mistake on a report or missed a deadline. Because let's be honest, I'd been operating on autopilot for weeks. My head wasn't in the game. My heart sure as hell wasn't. But instead, Mr. Canfield smiled at me across his desk like I was holding a winning lottery ticket. "Marcus," he said, "we've been watching your consistency, your leadership under pressure, and how you handle your teams. We're promoting you, effective immediately. You'll be overseeing operations across 3 of our subsidiary offices. It comes with a salary bump and relocation support if needed." I just stared at him, stunned. For a moment, I thought he was joking. But when he slid the contract across the table, the weight of the ink and paper hit me like a revelation. Something in my life was finally going up while everything else had been falling apart. I shook his hand, thanked him, and walked out of that office dazed. It was the first time in weeks I had felt something close to pride, like maybe I wasn't dead weight after all. That weekend, I cleaned out the cluttered spare room in my house and turned it into a workspace. I bought a new blazer, took myself out for dinner, and even ordered dessert for the hell of it. I started to feel a flicker of identity outside of being a husband and father, a man with his own future. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what happened next. The following Monday, I drove to the first of the subsidiary offices I was now overseeing. It was a sleek building downtown, nothing too fancy, but clearly trying to project professionalism. I parked in the visitor's lot, straightened my new blazer, and walked through the glass doors with my work tablet tucked under my arm. The receptionist's desk sat right at the front, facing the main entrance. I didn't see her face immediately. I was too focused on checking in with the security guard. But then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in person in weeks. "Marcus." It was small, unsure. I turned slowly, and there she was. Michelle. She was seated at the desk in a company-issued blouse, her posture stiff, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a full 3 seconds, neither of us moved. My heart thudded against my ribs, not from longing, not even from anger, but from pure shock. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked tired, and smaller than I remembered. But what hit me hardest was the name tag pinned to her chest, receptionist. That's when it clicked. She had lost that shiny new job, the one she left me for, the one that made me dead weight. And now, here she was, sitting behind a desk in one of the offices I now managed. I took a slow breath, nodded politely, and turned back to the security guard. "Can you show me to the manager's office?" I asked, as if she hadn't spoken at all, as if she were just another employee. Because right then, in that moment, I realized the power of silence. Not the kind that comes from pain or shock, but the kind you choose. The kind that sets a boundary. I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to ask her what happened. I didn't need to offer her any part of myself. Not anymore. As I walked away, I could feel her eyes burning into the back of my head. She didn't follow me right away. I think she was too stunned. But an hour later, after I'd finished the introductory meeting with the regional director, she appeared in the hallway near the elevator. "Marcus, please," she said. Her voice was soft again, fragile in a way that seemed calculated. "Can we talk?" I kept walking. "Marcus," she tried again, stepping into my path. "I made a mistake. Please." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt nothing. Not hate, not longing, just absence. The kind of absence that comes when a wound finally scars over. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I said, keeping my voice even. She looked like she might cry, but I didn't trust the tears. Not from someone who tore apart our life with so much certainty. "I didn't know you were working here," I added. "But that doesn't change anything." I stepped around her and pressed the elevator button. She didn't follow me that time. That night, she texted me from an unknown number. Long paragraphs. Apologies. Regrets. The kind of messages that come not from love, but from fear. From someone who realized too late that the grass isn't always greener. She told me she wanted to talk about Ava. That Ava missed me. That maybe we could try family counseling. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I knew where this was going. And I wasn't about to let her rewrite history just because she didn't like how the story ended. You don't get to burn the house down and then ask if you can come inside when it starts raining. Over the next few days, she kept trying. More texts. More voicemails. She even left a handwritten note with one of the interns, asking if we could meet for coffee just to talk. I gave it all the attention it deserved. None. Because I had learned something important in those weeks of silence. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it just means letting go, for your sake. I didn't hate her. I didn't wish her harm. But I also didn't owe her another ounce of myself. Not after she called me a burden. Not after she tried to erase me. When I got home that Friday, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch, watching the sky turn orange. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. I didn't even check. I just silenced it and looked out into the quiet, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just about the job, or the promotion, or the quiet house. It was about knowing that I had survived something that was meant to break me, that I was still standing, still breathing, still capable of joy. And that joy didn't have to come from anyone else. It could come from me. The following week, I settled into my new role with the kind of focus that surprised even me. I started visiting each of the subsidiary offices regularly, meeting with department heads, restructuring outdated processes, and getting to know staff I'd never had the chance to work with before. My schedule filled up quickly, and for once, the hours felt like they belonged to me. I wasn't racing home to play the perfect husband or stretch myself thin trying to prove my worth. There was a strange freedom in that, a new kind of silence, this time, chosen. A quiet that didn't feel like punishment, but like a pause, a breath. But it didn't last long, because Michelle wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She cornered me again, this time at the end of a Friday meeting. I was walking out of the conference room when I saw her lingering by the elevators. Her eyes caught mine immediately, and I could tell by the way she straightened up that she had rehearsed something. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice polite, but tight with anxiety. I glanced around, noting the curious eyes of a few employees nearby. With a quiet sigh, I motioned toward a side hallway, out of view. She followed like a shadow. "Look," she started, "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I messed up, Marcus. I crossed my arms and waited. Let her speak. If nothing else, I owed myself the closure of hearing it all laid bare. I thought I knew what I wanted, she continued, her eyes flickering with emotion. That job, it felt like freedom at first. I thought I was finally stepping into the version of myself I was meant to be. But it was all smoke. The company downsized after just a few months. They cut most of the new hires, including me, and by then, I'd already left everything behind. Her lip trembled slightly, and she looked away. I didn't think you'd move on so fast, she added, almost in a whisper. That part made me pause. Because it wasn't really about regret, was it? It was about control. About watching me do well without her. About realizing I wasn't waiting by the door with open arms and a broken spirit. You didn't think I'd move on? I repeated. Michelle, you told me I didn't deserve love. You left me with nothing but a suitcase full of bitterness and a daughter I haven't heard from in weeks. What exactly did you expect me to do? Sit in the dark and wait for you to change your mind? She flinched at that, but I didn't stop. You made a choice. One you were very sure of. And now you want back in because it didn't turn out the way you planned. That's not regret, Michelle. That's just consequences. She reached out, lightly touching my arm. I miss you, she said. I miss us. I miss the way you used to make everything feel safe. Her voice cracked a little, like she wanted me to believe this was some kind of epiphany, like suddenly realizing my worth absolved the months she spent tearing it apart. I stepped back. You miss the version of me that tolerated being treated like a safety net. I'm not that man anymore. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call her names. I just stated it plainly, like a truth too long ignored. Then she said the thing I had dreaded. The thing she had been circling around since the moment she saw me that first day. What about Ava? She asked, soft and strategic. She misses you. She asks about you all the time. She doesn't understand why you haven't called. That hit me in a way nothing else could. Because I had called. I had left messages. I had sent texts. All unanswered. Don't do that, I said quietly. Don't use our daughter to buy your way back into my life. Her face hardened, just for a second. I'm not using her, she said, but her tone betrayed her. She's a child, Marcus. She needs both of us. I nodded slowly. Then let her reach out to me. Let her decide what she needs. But you don't get to speak for her. Not anymore. That ended the conversation. She blinked rapidly, trying not to cry, then turned and walked away. I didn't watch her go. I turned the opposite direction and headed to my office, where I closed the door and leaned against it for a long time, breathing through the heaviness. That night, I went home and looked through the old hope box I had packed weeks earlier. Ava's drawing, her birthday cards, little reminders of the family I thought I had. I pulled out my journal and wrote a single sentence. She wants back in, but I'm not opening the door. I underlined it twice, because it had taken me this long, this damn long, to realize that not everyone who regrets losing you is worthy of getting you back. The next morning, I got a text from Ava. Short. Awkward. Hi, Dad. Mom said you were mad at us. Are you? I stared at that message for a long time. My hands shook. Not from anger, but from the heartbreak of knowing my child was being used as a pawn. I texted back. I'm not mad at you. I'll never be mad at you. I miss you every day. Can we talk sometime, just us? She didn't reply immediately, and I didn't push. Because even though my heart ached for her, I wasn't going to mirror Michelle's manipulation. I had to be better, steadier, even if it killed me inside. Michelle tried one more time the following week. A carefully worded email, offering to co-parent more collaboratively and suggesting we could rebuild trust for Ava's sake. I didn't answer. I forwarded it to my lawyer and asked them to document everything. I was done playing emotional chess. If she truly wanted to co-parent, we'd do it through legal channels. Clean, civil, distant. And yet, I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted space. Peace. The right to rebuild my life without having to explain why I no longer wanted someone who left when things got hard. She made a choice. And now, so had I. I was choosing myself. Not out of selfishness, but out of survival. It started small at first. Messages from Ava that sounded like Ava, but didn't quite feel like Ava. She'd never been one for formalities, but suddenly her texts came off rehearsed, too careful for a 13-year-old. "Hi, Dad, how are you?" instead of "Hey, what's up?" Or, "I think Mom is trying really hard," instead of "Mom says hi." The change was subtle, but I knew my daughter's voice like I knew my own heartbeat. It was Michelle's tone wearing Ava's name, and it broke something inside me every time I read them. Because I could feel my child being used as a tool, not maliciously by her own choice, but manipulated by someone who couldn't get through my boundaries any other way. I kept my responses soft, short, always filled with love. "I'm okay. I miss you. I love you." I wanted Ava to know that no matter what words Michelle fed her, she'd always have a safe place with me. A week later, Ava called me on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was bright at first, but her sentences felt like they were being read off a card. "Mom says maybe you'd forgive us if I stayed with you for a while," she said quickly, almost tripping over the words. "You know, like a test. So you can see how things could be again." My heart clenched. She didn't mean it to be cruel. She was just repeating what she'd been told. But hearing my child frame our relationship as a test, as a way to earn back Michelle's standing, felt like someone pressing on a bruise that hadn't even begun to heal. I took a breath. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I will never, ever need to forgive you. You didn't do anything wrong, and you don't have to prove anything to me. You're my daughter. You always have a place with me. But this, what Mom's telling you, it isn't fair to you, and it isn't fair to me." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Ava whispered, "So you don't want me there?" My chest burned. "I always want you with me," I said, my voice shaking. "Always. But not as a bargaining chip. Not like this. If you want to come stay with me because you want to, because it feels right to you, then yes. My door is open. Always. But I don't want you to be in the middle of grown-up things. That's not your job." She sniffled quietly. "Okay," she said. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. "You don't have to know what to do," I said softly. "That's my job. To keep you safe, even from the things you don't see." When we hung up, I sat on the couch for a long time staring at my phone. My hands were trembling, not from anger this time, but from a kind of grief so deep it felt like a tide pulling me under. Michelle wasn't just reaching for me anymore. She was reaching through Ava, pulling her strings like a puppet. And I couldn't retaliate without hurting the one person I loved most in the world. That's the part no one tells you about boundaries. People think it's just about saying no, but sometimes it's about holding your ground while someone you love gets caught in the crossfire. Sometimes it's about absorbing the blow quietly so they don't have to. Over the next month, the texts from Ava became more sporadic, less scripted. She started sending me pictures of her drawings again, selfies with her friends, little glimpses of her real life that felt like her voice was slowly reemerging. I never pushed. I just replied with warmth and patience. I knew she was testing the waters, seeing if I'd pull away if she stopped feeding me Michelle's words. I wouldn't. Not ever. But I also wouldn't play Michelle's game. If she wanted to get to me, she'd have to find another way. And she tried. Michelle began showing up outside my office. At first, she'd sit in the lobby pretending to sort papers or chat with coworkers. Then she started waiting by the parking garage. Once, she even left a gift bag on my car hood, a box of my favorite coffee beans with a handwritten note, "For old time's sake." I threw it away, not out of anger, but because I knew exactly what it meant. It wasn't about coffee. It was about trying to find a crack in my resolve, about nostalgia as a weapon, about pulling me back into a version of myself that no longer existed. I documented everything, every email, every text, every chance encounter, not because I planned to use it against her, but because I wanted a record, proof for myself that I wasn't imagining it, proof for Ava, if she ever needed to see the truth one day, because one day she would be old enough to understand, and I wanted her to know that I didn't disappear, that I didn't stop loving her, that I just refused to be manipulated. On the nights it felt like too much, when the weight of it pressed down on me until my chest ached, I went for long walks. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes two. Just me, the dark streets, and the rhythm of my footsteps. I'd whisper to myself, "This is temporary. This is how you protect her. This is how you protect yourself." It wasn't the kind of pep talk that made you feel good, but the kind that kept you standing. And slowly, it started to work. Ava began calling on her own. Not about Michelle. Not about reconciliation. Just to talk. about school, about a book she was reading, about a funny meme she found. And every time she did, I felt a piece of my heart knit back together. Because that was our bond. Untouched, unmanipulated, real. I knew Michelle wouldn't stop trying. I knew there'd be more tests, more subtle plays. But I also knew something she didn't. That I had finally learned the difference between love and obligation. Between forgiveness and access. Between protecting someone and sacrificing yourself for them. I had learned it the hard way, but I had learned it all the same. And I wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. Months passed. The seasons shifted in that subtle, almost invisible way that only hits you when you're standing still long enough to feel it. The brutal summer heat gave way to cooler evenings, and I found myself spending more time on the back porch, watching the wind stir fallen leaves across the concrete. Something about the quiet felt different now. Not lonely, not suffocating, just honest. Like a mirror that finally stopped lying. My home, once filled with echoes of a family that no longer existed, had transformed into a space I didn't need to escape from anymore. I started sleeping through the night again. I made actual meals instead of microwave leftovers. I'd play old jazz records on Sunday mornings, sipping coffee slowly, letting the sound fill the room without feeling like it was pretending to be happiness. It wasn't joy, not exactly, but it was peace. And peace was something I hadn't had in years. Ava kept reaching out, little by little. Her calls became more frequent, her voice more relaxed. She'd tell me about school projects, her favorite teachers, and the drama between her and her best friend, Layla, like nothing had ever changed. I played along, never pressing, never asking about Michelle unless she brought it up. I didn't want her to feel like she had to choose between us. I just wanted her to feel safe. One evening, she FaceTimed me from her room, her face framed by fairy lights and posters of pop stars I didn't recognize. "Can I ask you something?" she said. I nodded. "Why don't you hate Mom?" That question sat heavy in the air between us. I exhaled slowly. "Because hating her would change me more than it would ever change her," I said. "And I've worked too hard to be someone I can live with." She didn't respond right away, just stared at the screen with that thoughtful squint she got when she was younger and didn't understand her math homework. Finally, she said, "She talks about you sometimes. Like she wants to fix things." I swallowed, then offered a small smile. "That's between her and her own reflection, sweetheart. I've already let go." Michelle didn't stop trying. A few weeks after that call, she sent a letter, not an email, not a text, but an actual, handwritten letter. I recognized her handwriting before I even opened the envelope. It was a long, winding thing. Pages of apologies, sprinkled with nostalgia, dressed in phrases like, "I was lost," and "we were both hurting." She talked about the early years, about Ava's birth, about how I used to dance with her in the kitchen during those long winter nights. And then she made the ask. Not directly, but gently. Maybe, one day, we could try again. Maybe we owe it to ourselves, and to Ava, to see if there's still something left worth saving. I read it once, folded it carefully, and put it in the same box where I kept Ava's childhood drawings. Not out of hope, but out of history. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt everything, and that was exactly why I couldn't let her back in. Love wasn't a scavenger hunt. You didn't get to disappear when the weather turned cold and come knocking again when you needed warmth. That wasn't love. That was convenience. And I had outgrown being someone's shelter only when the storm hit. One Friday afternoon, I got a call from HR letting me know I'd be needed at the downtown office for a full-day audit. I hadn't seen Michelle face-to-face since our last conversation months ago. When I walked in, she was at the front desk, her eyes lifting with that brief spark of hope before settling into something more guarded. I nodded politely, professional but distant. She stood up. "Can we talk?" she asked, almost in a whisper. I shook my head gently. "I'm here for work." She blinked, her throat bobbing with something she didn't say. I turned toward the elevators. "Marcus, please," she tried again, voice tighter now. "I've changed." I pressed the button and faced forward. "So have I," I said. "And I'm not going backward." That evening, Ava called again. "I heard you saw Mom," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, briefly." There was a pause, and then she asked, "Was it hard?" I considered that. "It used to be," I said. "But not anymore." Seeing her now feels like looking at an old photograph, familiar, but distant. And I know that trying to live inside it again would just tear it at the edges. Ava didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, I think I get it. Months later, Michelle moved to another department. I heard through office gossip that she had requested a transfer. I didn't ask where. Didn't care. Whatever she was searching for, she'd have to find it without me. I had a new rhythm now. A life that didn't revolve around someone else's approval or affection. I spent weekends visiting my sister, started volunteering at a local mentorship program, and even began dating again. Carefully, quietly. No grand declarations. Just slow, honest steps toward connection. And most importantly, I was rebuilding something even more essential than romance. I was rebuilding my relationship with myself. The last time Michelle reached out, it was a short email. I hope you're doing well. Ava looks happy when she talks about you. I'm glad she still has you. That was it. No plea. No manipulation. Just a sentence that felt more like surrender than anything else. And in that small moment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt free. Looking back, I realize now that the version of me who wrote, "Thank you for everything," on the divorce papers was already planting the seeds for this man I've become. That version of me didn't know it yet, but he was starting to choose himself. Not out of pride or revenge, but out of love. The kind of love that says, you don't have to keep bleeding just to prove you're alive. I still miss Ava when she's not around. And there are days when the silence creeps back in. But now I welcome it. I fill it with music, with words, with meaning. I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. Not just of the person who hurt you, but of the person you were when you let them. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones you fight in silence. The ones where you choose dignity over drama and peace over the pain of holding on. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who only valued you once you were gone? Share your story in the comments, and let's talk about what it really means to choose yourself. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that cut deep and remind you you're not alone. See you soon in the next one.